Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from Iran, with Persian language English subs, released in the year 2016, directed by Babak Anvari, and this film is called Under the Shadow. So Under the Shadow is set during the Iraq-Iran war many years ago. So this Tehran, which is the capital city of Iran, has been besieged by rumours that the Iraqis are now firing missiles. So these missiles can strike at any minute, and it's causing a lot of paranoia inside the citizens of this city. In particular, a doctor, his wife, and his young daughter that live in an apartment complex. So this complex is constantly under pressure. There's a lot of bomb sirens going off, so everyone runs down to the bunker in order to wait out what's possibly going to happen. But this is not a good way of living, but this is ultimately the reality of living in a war zone. So one day the doctor tells his wife that he has to go and serve his military service in this red zone. So the red zone is where the conflict is. The mother doesn't want anything to do with this. She says that he needs to be here to protect them, but he can't do this. So he ends up leaving, and this ultimately leaves the mother and the daughter to basically contest with their paranoia all themselves. So one day the paranoia is about to intensify when an unexploded missile comes crashing through the apartment complex roof. So they all go out there to look at it, and it hasn't exploded. Very lucky. But are they lucky? Because some of the superstitious tenants believe that this missile has brought with it a supernatural entity called a Djinn. Now the Djinn lives on the wind and is very aggressive. So when all the other tenants decide to leave because it's too dangerous ultimately to stay here, the mother and the daughter decide to stay put, that this is their house and that they're going to protect their house. So not only do they now have to combat the prospect of being bombed, but they also have to try and combat the prospect of being victims to this aggressive Djinn. So whether or not they can is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Under the Shadow. This movie came with a lot of hype. A lot of festivals were praising it to no end, and the fact that it was Iranian was also another reason why I really wanted to see it. Now I haven't actually seen any Iranian films yet. I know Iranian films such as A Separation and A Girl Walks Home Late at Night are Iranian films that do come with a lot of praise, and I haven't actually seen them, but the fact that I got to see this film was actually very intriguing, because I'm always looking to see films from different regions, and the Arabic or the Persian sort of region, the Middle Eastern region, is very interesting to me, because they have their own sort of mythology, and the mythology of the Djinn. And I was very interested to see how they were going to use the mythology of the Djinn, and after seeing the film I will say that the way they use it is incredibly interesting, because it does hit you on so many levels. It hits you on a straight out supernatural tale, and it also hits you out on a paranoia sort of manifestation tale. So it's a movie that does make you think on many more levels. It's much more than just a one-dimensional paranormal entity film that follows all the usual paranormal entity tropes. This is a movie that does follow on a very character-based driven sort of story, and the story is told very well, because not only do you have that supernatural element, the supernatural element only hits you in the last 20 minutes, and that is a result of all the pressure that is built up from the first, say, 3/4 of this movie. This movie is about living in a war zone and the pressure that can bring of living in a war zone. This is a movie about a mother who feels like she has been neglected. She feels like a mother that feels as though she's got no future, and that she has to look after her daughter all by herself. Her husband has left, and so who can she rely on? So there's a lot of pressure for that, and I thought the pressure is told very well. It's told in a very claustrophobic and atmospheric sense, and so it's a very matter-of-fact way that this film is shot. It takes place in one setting, and I think the overall idea of taking place in one setting gives you that emotional connection to her and what she's actually going through. It's a very emotionally draining film, and I thought the further the movie goes on, the smaller and smaller this woman's world is getting, and so the manifestations of all of her pressures is starting to come out in this Djinn. And whether or not you want to actually believe the Djinn exists, or maybe it's all in her head, that is where the film really hits you on so much more on a unique level. So it's a very mature film, and it's a very respectful film, and it will make you think, and it actually just documents living in a war zone and how much pressure that can be. There are some very scary scenes at the start of the film where you've got these sirens that go off, and every time the siren goes off, it is imminent danger, and that there could be bombs that are going to land on this apartment at any minute. So it's very suspenseful in the way it does that. And so it's not going into a straight-out horror film, but it does show you the horrors of actually living in this sort of era and living under these circumstances. And there's circumstances that I think are absolutely terrifying, and no one deserves to live in them. So you always feel as though the anticipation is there. You feel as though the anticipation is there, whether it's the bomb hitting them or in fact the supernatural entity coming into the film. And I think when the actual final 20 minutes really hits you, it hits you on a very, very scary level. This is a movie that definitely makes you want to sleep with the light on. I thought the reason why it's so scary is because it's so subtle, and it's very much few and far between. So you're never becoming desensitized to overall horror tropes where it's, a loud bang at night and there are some jump scares, but once again, they are few and far between. They're used very sparingly, and I think they're used very well because it does give you that sense that, okay, I'm actually living in this war zone with this family. And so if you have a movie that only really depicts two characters for the majority of the film, the emphasis is on the acting. I thought the acting was absolutely fantastic from the mother and the daughter. I could feel their connection, I could feel their panic as well. And so the more this woman is going through all these stressful situations, the more you feel as though, okay, this is manifesting into something far greater, and that it is threatening to destroy everything that she has. And so it's definitely a very psychological horror film, and at the same time you've got a very supernatural horror film. So it's going to appeal to a lot of horror fans, and I think that's the reason why it deserves to be seen, is because it's definitely something different within the very tight subgenre of supernatural horror. So there is a very subtle soundtrack that really does get under your skin. It's a very slow build-up, but it's never boring because you've got these fascinating characters put into these fascinating situations where it's about the Iran-Iraq war, which I'm not too familiar with, and it doesn't really dictate to you. It's not giving you a history lesson, but it's just basing it in a very, very interesting era and a very interesting environment that allows the horror to really kick in at the end, because you feel as though the horror is the result of all the anticipation that is being built up. So it's masterfully told. I thought there were very good moments. There are some moments that I thought could have been edited a little bit better. Some of the editing I thought was a little bit off here and there, and it's definitely a movie that's not going to appeal to fans of The Conjuring, these very standard sort of supernatural horror films where it's all about jump scares thick and fast. It's definitely a movie that does have that slow progression of dread and anticipation, and it does boil over into a very rewarding climax. So I'm highly recommending this film. I think it's definitely worth its praise, and as a result of that, I'm going to give Under the Shadow 4 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, go watch movies, and I'll see you later.